So, script says I want to start with something real. I think I just did. So we are living through an unprecedented moment where many people can clearly see and feel that something is wrong. We are watching abuses of power, attacks on democratic norms, and witnessing violations of our Constitution happen almost daily. People across the country are feeling the weight of that uncertainty and that instability. The government is meant to work for the people, and this current administration doesn't believe in this principle. The rules seem to have changed based on who holds power. Civic participation feels harder, it's less trusted, and it feels less meaningful than it should. And here's the truth. Moments like this test what democracy actually is. Democracy is being tested in our communities and in our daily lives. So tonight isn't just about naming challenges, it's about asking a bigger question. What do we build in response? Because resilience isn't passive and it's not abstract. It's something people create together every single day. So that's what this conversation is about. What's happening, what it looks like on the ground, and most importantly, what we can actually do about it. Let me introduce the folks who are helping us think about that tonight. Kate Duffy, she is the founder of Motherhood for Good. Give it up for her. Matt DeFour, he is from the State Bureau, or he's State Bureau Chief and from Wisconsin Watch. Fernanda Jimenez-Hauch, Leadership Chair of Comité Fronteras. And Edgar, Deputy Director of Impact Programs, Free and Fair Elections, and State Strategies of Protect Democracy. All right, so to get started, we're going to just go down the table and do some quick bios. If you want to give your name, pronouns, title, and a little bit about your organization. We'll start with Edgar.
Everyone, Edgar Lynn, she read my title, it's so long, I'm not gonna read it. He, him, and I came to Wisconsin for law school in 2008, and I've been here ever since. I was a public defender for 8 years, and then, civil rights, criminal defense privately for 3 years before I joined Protect Democracy, because I saw, the authoritarian threat is greater than ever.
Hi, my name is Kate Duffy. I founded Motherhood for Good. I'm so excited to be here. And I know you said this was 31 years old of an organization. My organization is about 4 years old and it's very organic, I would say. I know there's a lot of people who've been in this space for a long time, doing this work forever, and all have really good relationships. I kind of took a different path in and just elbowed my way in. So I'm very grateful to be accepted into spaces and rooms like this. I am not formally super political, but started to get more after I had my first baby, and there was a lot of stuff happening in 2022. And my background is in marketing and advertising, and I felt there was a gap of messaging at the time, especially on social media and especially to women. I feel like a lot of women either didn't have a seat at the table or didn't have the confidence to talk about policy issues and making some of these decisions, although they're already doing so much work that technically I could argue would be considered policy advancing in their own communities. And I looked at all of these essentially organizers and thought, okay, I'm going to start talking to them and try to create an on-ramp to getting involved in this work. And so the community has grown and grown over time, and it's just been amazing, and I've learned so much. And I create content online, and we kind of do some gatherings in real life, and just do a lot of organizing both digitally and in person to try to get more people involved.
Awesome.
Okay. My name is Fernanda Jimenez-Hauch. Pronouns she, hers, ella. and I am an undocumented immigrant under the program DACA with my comrades with Comité Sin Fronteras. For those who don't know Comité Sin Fronteras, we are officially a little over 2 years old now. We started because we saw a gap in the immigrant rights movement. Many people don't know this, but for DACA recipients, there's not often a place where you can grow a leadership development, keep organizing to defend and protect the immigrant community. And so we built that. It's predominantly led by DACA recipients, undocumented immigrants, children of immigrants, and our beautiful allies that want to help us to protect and defend immigrant communities, not just under this administration, but under every single administration that has hurt and damaged us.
Hi, so I'm Wisconsin Watch is actually the oldest, one of the oldest nonprofit investigative news outlets in the entire country that's state-based. We're as old as ProPublica. And I realized that talking to folks to Marilyn and Steve tonight, so again, show of hands who's heard of Wisconsin Watch? Okay, well, people have. We used to be called the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism when Jimenez-Hauch, two longtime state journal reporters, started it in 2009. And so I'm dear friends with them. I worked at the Wisconsin State Journal for 16 years as a local government and education reporter. I covered state government. I was part of a team where we were a Pulitzer Prize finalist for our coverage of the Act 10. Yeah, and so I've been at Wisconsin Watch since 2022, and we continue to be nonpartisan, nonprofit journalism, where I think that's a really important part of just the entire democracy process. Having reliable, accurate, trustworthy information is foundational to having a strong democracy. And that's under threat as much as anything that everyone here cares about. So we're really glad to be part of this conversation.
Awesome, thank you so much, everyone. So we're gonna dive right in. So we want to start understanding the moment. We're going to ground ourselves and talk about what's really happening here in Wisconsin. So the first question is to you, Matt. From your vantage point covering state government, what were the most consequential things that happened this last legislative session? And with candidates circulating nomination forms, it's midterm seasons here in Wisconsin. How do you think this fall will shape up to years past?
So I forgot to thank Nick and Nick and the Democracy Campaign. Last year, we did a 3-part series on Wisconsin had the most expensive Supreme Court race in 2025 in US history, $145 million to spend on the race. And so we produced a 3-part series that the Democracy Campaign was really instrumental in helping us pull the numbers together. It was just recently recognized by the Milwaukee Press Club as the best explanatory story in Wisconsin last year. But I do think that 2025 election was one of the most consequential things we saw over this last session. The other, obviously, I think the biggest thing of this past session is that this may be the final session, the final legislative session of what has been a 16-year experiment in, I'll call it the Republican experiment era of Wisconsin government. It's very likely that the Republicans will not be in power in the legislature as they have been for and it's not Mark Miller's here, except for those 6 months in 2012 when he was in power. That was very important though, actually, when it came to the whole Jimenez-Hauch question. It's the story for another time. But anyway, so I would say if we're talking about what are the most important things in this past session, we had this incredibly Kim was described as an obscene amount of money spent on a Supreme Court race. Elon Musk himself spent $30 million. That alone is almost as much as had been spent in any previous Supreme Court elections in US history. But again, what we're seeing, I'm a little bit of like it's like whatever happened this past week is like the most important thing. I feel like we can't remember what happened 2 weeks ago. But what we saw this past week with the lame duck legislative leaders and the lame duck governor basically assume that they still had some kind of power in the state to just sort of exert their will. They wanted to spend $1.8 billion of the state surplus to do tax cuts, give money to special education. It was a compromise. But they forgot that they're on their way out and that there's a whole new generation of leaders coming up. And so this was kind of reminiscent of what we've seen over the last 8 years with split government, is that we've not had really a strong direction for the state. It's been Tony Evers playing goalie, Republican leaders sort of clinging to the power that they tried to put in place during the lame duck session in 2018. And so, depending on how the elections turn out this fall, it's going to likely be the first real new chapter in Wisconsin history in 16 years. So it's going to be a very interesting time to watch what's going on. So.
Thank you. And to Edgar, Protect Democracy is all about preserving and fighting for democratic institutions. From your perspective, where are the guardrails of our democratic systems being tested the most right now, in ways that might not be the most obvious to the public?
It's hard to say because what guardrail is not tested right now. There are things that are obvious and the things that are more silent. So obvious ones that we all know of is sort of the new weaponization of Department of Justice. In most of American history, there was a wall that separated the executive and the Department of Justice. That wall has completely been gone. And so, DOJ, traditionally, they have an oath to the Constitution to follow the law and not create an enemies list that they should go after. That was
J. Edgar Hoover.
Right. James Comey, Tisha James, SPLC, Jerome Powell, Don Lemon, the list goes on, right? And so the more silent erosions are things like the FCC, who, they have open enforcement action against, networks airing things that the administration dislikes, whether that's Jimmy Kimmel, View, stuff like that. There's CISA. CISA is something, it's essentially the election security agency that has been pretty much gutted. And what they do is sort of monitor foreign threats into our elections. And so now for the first time, a lot of election officials are flying blind or without full information in terms of protecting our elections. Inspectors generals who are, internal watchdog to things that are happening within the administration, right? And they report to Congress, dozens are fired or sidelines. So there are just many examples in which these things are silently happening because the autocrat uses salami tactics, slicing, slice by slice, taking away these guardrails. I will say that on a more positive note, that in the end, we are still, at least for now, a free and fair country in terms of the ability to cast our ballot, right? So the power still lies within the people, that if people show up, they can't exist.
Thank you so much, leaving us on a hopeful note. Fernanda, with your leadership with Comité, you're working directly with immigrant communities in Milwaukee and surrounding areas. What does that look like on the ground? What are people experiencing in real time?
Okay, not so hopeful. There's two realities what we see on the ground. The first reality is ICE that has almost an unlimited budget to run rampant. We're seeing that happening in all regions. Madison, Milwaukee, we're seeing Kenosha, Eau Claire, Green Bay. And in every region, it's very different the way we have to respond to what's happening in that area. We've realized at Comité that every city, every community needs something differently. And the attacks that ICE is doing to these communities, these neighborhoods, is different as well. We're seeing that they're targeting everyone and anyone. They're targeting people who have visas, that are citizens, that have DACA. This is one of the first years where we've been seeing more DACA recipients being detained and deported. So we're constantly just hearing threats on our immigrant communities, not just nationally, but even in our state, in our communities. More people are afraid to leave their homes, to get groceries, to go to work, to drop off their kids' schools. or even just to enjoy their life and go out. So that's the other reality. The one reality that we see where ICE is clearly targeting and attacking our immigrant communities and our communities in general. And also the immigrant community impacted by these threats and these attacks that no longer feel safe in their homes, in their own neighborhoods. And so what we are doing in Comité is fighting back as much as we can, making sure that they know the information that they need to, how to fight back, and how to lean with each other when these things happen. But the other thing to also end on a hopeful note, we are seeing more resilience. We're seeing more people show up at our meetings, at our trainings. We're seeing more people asking, how can I help? What can I do? I don't want to see this happening in my neighborhood. And that is really hopeful for us because for so long in the immigrant community, we had to beg for people to care. We had to beg for people to listen to us, to hear our stories, and to center us. And now we're seeing more people are listening and more people are willing to put themselves out there to protect and defend our communities.
Thank you. Kate, so a lot of people don't necessarily see themselves as political, but these times we're in call for collective action. You have a growing audience. What are you hearing from moms or from people that are shifting their view on getting involved?
Yeah, so I say I like to specialize in the I don't do politics kind of people. I've heard it so many times, it's like a challenge to me now. It doesn't even frustrate me anymore. And I actually have a story about this. So I was at the salon recently getting my hair done, and I was talking to the woman who does my hair and has for a long time, and she follows Motherhood for Good, and so she looks at my content, and I would say just even by doing that is maybe more informed than the average voter. And I started talking to her about the governor's race, and which I feel like I'm yapping about constantly. And she hadn't heard anything about it and didn't really know who the candidates were. And so it was, first of all, a great reminder that everybody has different tunnels of communication that they're getting this information from. But she was like, no, I'm gonna lock in. I've just been so busy and I haven't had time for politics. And that's a lot of the moms and women I talk to a lot. And then she says, but I did join the PTO, and there's something they're working on in their school. She's like, I've been leading the charge and texting all the parents, and we've got this meeting and we're going to do this and we're trying to get the, and it was like, I almost was just kind of smiling because I'm like, she's saying she doesn't have time for politics, but then she's actually taking this huge step in leading this charge to do something in her kid's school and working with the community members. And that is all politics as well. And it may not be like as big and as urgent as some of the stuff we're talking about, but what I have noticed is all of those little steps really lead up to more. And when somebody feels a sense of accomplishment or even just a sense of community once they've built or seen a change that they have put through the system at whatever level, they start to get involved even more so, and they start to see how everything is connected. And I get to see all the time, all of these people come in with like one issue on their mind that they really want to change. And then, before I know it, they're like stepping up and volunteering for different organizations or running different things. And so I think it's just a good reminder that, we can bring people in at all levels, even if they, may not be political or think they're political in a sense. Everybody cares about things. Everybody has values. And I'm like on a mission to get the stigma away from like politics being a bad thing and just encouraging people to get out there and go change policy for the better, and just try to fix some of the stuff going on, even in the littlest sense, so we can all make it better in a bigger sense.
Thank you. That was a great answer. And there's so many ways of getting involved, right? Like people can just reshare your post. That's a form of helping spread awareness.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll shift. We're gonna hold ourselves accountable and talk about where we're getting it wrong. So if we're being honest, we want to take a moment and reflect on ourselves. First question is to you, Kate. So you are great at distilling complicated topics into concise, conversational, and resonant explainers. So what do you feel actually moves people versus just sounding good in a room like this?
So I have found that people love and appreciate just learning about why something is broken or why everybody's screaming about it. And a lot of political communications are more kind of fear-based and urgent, and it is all urgent. And previously, we didn't have these platforms and social media and all of these avenues to have longer, more nuanced conversations about these things. And so it's funny because people come up to me a lot and they're like, you do such a good job of like distilling this down for normal people. And I'm like, because I am a normal person. I had to Google everything and spend hours on Wisconsin Watch, getting all my facts right. But at the end of the day, it's interesting that they tell me that because I think, like, in a sense, I'm a good messenger for some of those people because I don't use some of just like the jargon and buzzwords that a lot of people who have worked in this space for a really long time are just so used to saying because it's just part of their knowledge. And so I think, hold on, just like make sure I answer the whole question. So I think what moves, everybody is moved by different things, which is why I think it's so important to have all different, everything that people are doing to help. I think it all matters because different people are drawn to different things. And so I think like some of the quick hit messaging that a lot of people are used to seeing is really important. And the democracy and like the dictator type messaging. And then there's people who just want to like learn more, like everybody's talking about gerrymandering and the maps that are happening all over. And it's probably time I get the whiteboard out again and like break down gerrymandering. They'll be like, Jerry who? But sometimes people don't even want to ask that question because it's just being talked about so much they feel stupid that they don't know what that is. So it takes a little bit longer, but I think just having those conversations with people and making sure they really understand what's going on, and being willing to say, yeah, I didn't know this either, but just having conversations with people has been really successful in my work.
Real quick, I may be a final follow-up question. What do you do with people who have strong opposing opinions? How do you navigate those situations when you're not seeing eye to eye with somebody without having it devolve into something really negative?
Oh, I just ignore them. No, I'm not. There's certain people you can tell like when there's an opening and you can have a further conversation, and then when somebody's just trying to like fight with you, that I don't have time. So gotta respect your peace too,
Absolutely. All right, Fernanda. As someone who is both on the ground and involved in state level nonprofit organizations, what are institutions or organizations missing about what people actually need right now? How can we start to address that disconnect?
I was actually talking about it with my friend, Yuseli, who you all also know and love, about this question because for us that work in the nonprofit world as well and do this work during our free time when we have free time, which feels like never, but we make it. And a lot of the times we're talking to other people, especially in the pro-democracy world, on how to fill in those gaps and how to talk to people who are affected, is they sometimes overlook undocumented families because they just see them as, well, they can't vote. We can't, there's not much we can have them do. They can't vote. How do we get them involved? They can't vote. And it's to us, it's just, you're missing a gem that you really need to include in your work, in your pro-democracy work. And we talk about it all the time because we're DACA residents that can't vote either, and we're in this work. And we're telling people to go out and vote. And we're also working in this work to make sure that folks are doing this and continuing to do the work that we're doing to fight for democracy. And it's something that for this type of work, for folks to not overlook every time they're strategizing, who are we talking to, who is being impacted by this, and who are we missing? And I always advocate for the undocumented community because they often don't get seen as the people that can be involved in these rooms, in these spaces, in the meetings, and their family members. I have a mixed status family now where my nephew's going to be 18 soon, and he will be a voter, and he doesn't get taught that he should be voting because his parents can't vote because they're undocumented. And these are the people that need to also be included in the conversations. They need to be seen, and that is how we can build that bridge in the work that we do. And so that's my one part of it. And also for us that are in the immigrant world and how we approach our issues and how we want to see the world, it's to also understand why we migrate to this country that we call the belly of the beast. We don't just migrate to a country because we want a better world, and that I know often you hear that, like, they came here for a better world, they came here because that's all that they could see. Often it is because of the word imperialism, and we live in this country now in the belly of the beast so that we can fight what had affected our country, that now we're here fighting so that we don't have that same issue. And I think that's also important when we're doing this work, is to acknowledge, why are these people coming to our country? Why are they here? Why are they impacted by their own problems that we're trying to fix? And so those are the ways that we can build that bridge and that disconnect.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, Edgar. Protect Democracy recently put out a report called Executive Override, which lays out how the Trump administration will try to undermine elections in the fall. Can you give a summary of this report, and what do folks in this room need to know so that we can combat their strategy?
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
Come on, Kate.
I know.
I brought the report. It's very thick. So there's some reference from the heard you like that. Okay, so this is a 3-part playbook which we have named the 3 Ds, and that is deceive, disrupt, and deny. And I'm gonna go into that. And so we've seen the strategy play out in the last election. The difference, and we beat it, right? Like, I mean, not the election results, but you know, whatever. But the point is, these are beatable. In 2024, when you think about these fringe concepts and the fringe conspiracy theorists, they were coming from the fringes, but now it is coming from the White House, right? And so what is flipped now is that there is the full power of the federal government behind these conspiracy theories. And so what do? They deceive, right? They manufacture false narratives to create sort of a pretext for disruption. So that includes the conspiracies and the lies. That includes, you know, talking about how mail-in ballots create a rigged election system, that non-citizens are voting to steal the election. They are raiding the Fulton County ballots. You know, we're here in Wisconsin, there's news about that as well. But why does that have to do with the midterms? And that is because they are laying the disinformation ground to fertilize it so that, you know, when it comes down to the road, down to the final certification of elections, there's enough doubt in it. So that's the deceive part. They want to generate this like uncertainty to the election results. And then the next part is disrupt. So they use the might of the government to sort of quash political activity and to manipulate election rules. So deploying federal power against opponents, right? We talked about, you know, political prosecutions here, organizations, officials, using violence to silence Americans, manipulate election rules. When ICE was deployed all over the place, you know, that was meant to create a atmosphere of fear, right? And to intimidate the American people. They're trying the SAVE Act. It's not really going anywhere. They're trying to block eligible voters with the executive orders. And so that is what they're doing to disrupt the election. And finally, what they do, if the result is not what they hope to be, they will deny the results, as we call election denialism. And what they do when they deny is to put the pressure on election officials to not certify an election. That was a big fear in 2024. However, you know, their regime, their party won, and that's where it is. And so, all right, that was dark. So I'm gonna get into the good stuff. Nice to know. So, what can we do about it as just regular citizens or community leaders? I think when you think about civil society leaders, many of you are, right? You're a leader in your neighborhood, you're a leader in your space. Educating people, you're hosting community events, demystify the process because people don't know all the nitty-gritty of election administration. And so educating people, everyday folks about the process so they're more immune to the sort of the disinformation that comes. Business leaders, they can leverage their influence as employers in the community, affirm their commitment to free and fair elections. Universities, we're at UW-Madison, that's where I came to law school, right? Nonprofits, universities, they are credible messengers about accurate information. Then you think about, next one is scientists, union workers, healthcare providers, veterans that can mobilize their diverse networks. These, again, are credible people. Unions can mobilize workers around to participate in the political process. They've been doing it forever. Thank you, unions. Scientists, healthcare providers can provide facts and truth. As much as maybe that may be obscured, they can use their microphone and talk about that. Veterans who swore an oath to defend the Constitution, they have that moral authority that can come in and push back on these efforts.